Hi everyone, Dr. Hall. We're going to talk about nerves and cranial nerves for lecture 7. And I've broken it up into 3 major pieces. So what is a nerve? Let's be clear about that. Then some of the major peripheral nerves that we're going to find out in the body. And then we're going to talk about those 12 cranial nerves. Yeah, and there's 12 of them. So I've broken that up into 3 parts. So let's start with 7A. What is a nerve? So let's remember the neuron, right? And the axon is the part of the neuron that sends a signal. And sometimes it has to travel a really long way. So we have axons that are going to every single part of our bodies. And so when we look at the central versus the peripheral nervous system, a quick reminder again, central nervous system is the brain and spinal cord. Peripheral nervous system is the nerves, so both the cranial and spinal nerves. We'll talk about those more in this lecture, as well as something called ganglia, which we haven't touched on yet, but that's going to be a new concept. Also remember that there are 2 different directions that signals can be traveling. So they can be traveling from the brain and spinal cord out to the body, which we call efferent with an E, like it's exiting. That's how I remember it. It's exiting the CNS and going out to the body. It's called efferent or motor. Those words are used interchangeably. Or it's coming from the body in towards the brain and spinal cord. Think it has affection force, so it's moving toward the brain and spinal cord, and that's afferent. I always say afferent, so it's very clear which word I'm saying, but technically it's pronounced afferent or sensory. So I'll tend to use the word sensory just because it's less confusing. So let's remember those things. And it turns out that the cell bodies or soma of neurons they don't live out in the nerves. They only live in the central nervous system. So in the brain, that's supposed to be a little neuron cell body, and in the spinal cord. And then they also live in ganglia. So ganglia are little groups or clusters of neurons that are outside of the central nervous system. So let's kind of put one there, for example. So there are these ganglia that are out in the peripheral nervous system. You might be like, wait a minute, I thought a group of neurons that were doing a similar job that was called a nucleus. It is sometimes when it's within the CNS. If you have a group of neuron cell bodies specifically outside of the CNS, that is called a ganglion. Okay, so sometimes those axons have to travel a long distance. For example, the neuron that is telling, let's see, so I'm wiggling my toes right now, and the neuron cell body lives down here in my spinal cord. I don't know if you can see that yellow. And then the axon has to go all the way down into my toe. So sometimes these axons have to go a really long distance. So it turns out that a nerve is just a bundle of axons. So as these axons are traveling to or from different parts of the body, the sun is getting to be an issue, so we're going to relocate. So as these nerves are moving to or from, as these axons are moving to or from different parts of that's not better, different parts of the body. I'm just going to sit on the, no, yes, no, yes. Okay, this will work. We're sitting on the floor. Okay. All right, they travel through nerves. We're going to move rooms, actually. Okay. So I like to think of it kind of as cord management. So a nerve is this bundle of axons that are traveling together. So here's this image, the photographic image of cord management, right? So you have all of these different computers and they have these cords coming out of them, and all of those cords are going to travel probably to a power supply in this situation. And so they're kind of moving together through what would be like a nerve in our body. My apologies for this. I should have worked that out ahead of time. So in the diagram on the left, this whole thing here, this whole thing is a nerve, and it's kind of coming out at us. That's why it's getting bigger. And so you can see within the nerve, there's all these little bundles of axons. Each one of those little circles, one of those little blue circles, is an individual axon with its myelin sheath. And because we are in the peripheral nervous system, that myelin sheath is being formed by a Schwann cell. I'm just going to plug in and then we'll get back to it. All right. Beauty. So just a reminder that axons only send signals one way, right? So the action potential always goes in one direction only. So again, a reminder here, if it's going from the central nervous system out to the body, we call that motor or efferent. If it's traveling from the body in toward the central nervous system, that is sensory or afferent. So depending on which types of neurons neuron axons, depending on which types of axons are traveling in a nerve. The nerve itself, if it only is containing sensory axons, well, that would be a sensory nerve. If it's containing only motor axons, well, that's going to be a motor nerve. And if it contains both types, then that's going to be a mixed nerve. So in this diagram from the Hedges textbook, this is actually part of the spinal cord. So we're going to see this diagram again later this week. But you can see here's a bundle of axons traveling together that are all sensory. They're all sending their information in this direction. So that's a sensory nerve. This one down here, these axons tend to be they're all sending their signals out. So those are motor axons, so that's a motor nerve. But then these fibers come together and form some mixed nerves. So we will see that. So just a reminder, all nerves are coming and going from the central nervous system. The central nervous system is involved in pretty much everything. There isn't a nerve that goes like from one part of my body to another part of my body that doesn't go to the central nervous system. And if it only comes in and out through the brain, that's a cranial nerve. And if it comes in and out at the level of the spinal cord, that is a spinal nerve. So, and then all of those nerves can be motor nerves if they only have motor axons, sensory nerves if they only have sensory axons, or mixed if they have both. All right, so in summary, nerves are bundles of axons as they're traveling through out in the body in the peripheral nervous system. Those axons can be motor, efferent, away from the CNS, or sensory afferent, sending signals like sensory information into the brain and spinal cord. If they come in and out directly from the brain, those are cranial nerves. If they come in and out at the spinal cord, those are spinal nerves. And they can be sensory nerves, motor nerves, or mixed nerves. And that's it.